Hey everybody, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. I love this because this is really how you separate those who've been there before and done that from those who have not. And so today we're going to talk about remodeling. And I think one of the more distressing things that's out there is that anytime you see lots of articles out there on your news feeds and TikTok videos and everyone else, and they say you absolutely need to do this before you sell your home, or you know, this is the remodel that will give you the biggest bang for the buck. And it turns out that, I mean, there is no always in those situations. So what we're really going to talk about here is a framework to figure out if remodeling might make sense for you. And you're going to see that it's really more of a strategy decision and less about what you need to do. Just to be clear, at the end of this video, we're going to end up with a strategy to make a decision about whether or not you should remodel a room or rooms, or the kinds of remodeling that you might want to do. And there really is no one size fits all solution. Every house is different. So you should really take advantage of the resources that are out there to make sure you're making the right decision for you. For those of you who haven't met me, I am Matt Heisler. I am the broker owner of Vanderbilt Properties here in Massachusetts. I've been selling real estate for 22 years, 23 now. I just passed my anniversary. I'm not an attorney and I'm not a lender, but I have sold plenty of houses and helped people with plenty of remodeling projects. And although this is a very brief overview, we will try to really break down how I think about it. So I'm a big math guy. Remodeling to me a lot of times is about the math. So I'm going to give everyone a simple formula. I hope you don't get too bored with this formula. This is a very simplistic way to think about why people remodel and why people buy houses that need to be remodeled. Okay, that's really what we're going to go over here. So a house has a current value, right, in the market the way that it is. All right. Everything is worth something. I don't care if the whole thing needs to be remodeled. I don't care if nobody's touched it in 65 years. It doesn't matter. It's worth something. Okay. At least in Massachusetts, everything is worth something. If you want to remodel a kitchen, a bath, a basement, whatever, okay, whatever, if you want to add a deck, right? If you want to add a screened-in porch, whatever that remodel is, it has a cost, okay? And the cost can vary depending on how nice you want to make it and all sorts of things. But for now, we're just going to say that we know that it has a cost. The whole point of doing the remodel is that your house will gain additional equity, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about how much equity you should be targeting for every remodeling job. And then at the end of that, you get the future home value. So why do people remodel? Well, sellers remodel because that if they do the remodel, then they get additional equity, right? And so a good target for that is you should be targeting about a 50% return. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you spend $35,000 or $40,000 remodeling something, your house should be worth $60,000 more on the open market. And it probably will be. I mean, there are exceptions. If your house is really small, or if it's a condo, spending $40,000 might not be the smartest kind of thing to do. But, and if it's a really large home, a very expensive home, only spending $40,000, I know it sounds crazy, but only spending $40,000 might actually devalue the home. Okay. One of the key things about remodeling is you don't want it to, at the end of the project, you don't want it to look like it needs to be done again, right? That won't build you any equity, and it may actually you may actually cost you money, right? So it's really, really important that if you choose to remodel, that it comes out at a very high level, and it's commensurate with the future price that you want to sell the home at. But the key here is that sellers end up with the additional equity. And, I mean, there's not a lot of things in life where you can get a 50% return for a couple of months of work. Most of the time, you're not even doing it. You're hiring someone else to do it. And that's why people remodel their homes, okay, for a 50% return. There are lots of ways to screw this up. I don't want to make it out that this is easy. It is definitely not easy, but this is why. And on the flip side, why would buyers buy a house that needs to be remodeled? Well, they would buy it because they get the additional equity. Okay. If you sell the house with what it's worth without being remodeled, and then someone buys that house and remodels it, they're going to gain the additional equity. And the reason I point this out is the person who does the work, they take on the risk. Okay. And if you take on the risk, then you get the opportunity to build the equity. Now, if you're selling, you're going to get that equity right back. If you buy the house and you renovate it, you're not going to get that equity, really until you either refinance or until you sell the house. So for buyers, their incentive is to buy stuff that's already finished because A, they don't want to do the work. Neither does the seller, by the way. Sellers don't want to do the work either. Nobody wants to do the work. But if you do the work, no matter who does it, there should be a return. So buyers don't buy houses that need, say, $100,000 worth of work for $100,000 less. They will sit on their hands and wait until another house comes on that doesn't need the work and pay that price. But if it's $150,000 less than that other house, well, then they see there's an opportunity to make $50,000 in equity there. And so then that price becomes attractive. I hope everyone sees how this works from both sides of the angle so that you can see that it doesn't really matter if you remodel or not. The only question is who is going to benefit from the remodeling. So if you don't want to do any remodeling, this is the best news for you I can give you. You don't have to, especially in this market. But if you want to build equity and you're on the buy side, here's the great news. There's a lot of sellers who don't remodel. So it works for everyone. And remodeling ultimately is a choice. All right, now here are the real factors that everyone should evaluate before doing a remodeling. First of all, your finances, okay? This isn't something that you really want to do on credit cards if you can avoid it, okay? Unless unless you have a high risk tolerance, okay? I would not do it that way. I would try to get a home equity line and do the remodeling, right? I don't tell the bank that you're going to sell because then they may not give you the home equity line. They don't like doing home equity lines and then have you sell it later. Not that that's illegal. It's not illegal. They just don't like it. So, but if you get a home equity line, that's usually fairly cheap funding, right? And sometimes that may allow you to do the remodeling 1 or 2 years so you can enjoy it before you sell. Always a good idea. I think it's great to get the remodeling out of the way before you sell so you can enjoy it. Don't feel like you're selling a perfectly finished house to somebody else. You also want to check to make sure that the market is going to be good for sellers or bad for sellers or, the whole market. In some markets, they're so bad for sellers, you really need to make sure that you're not putting a property on that needs so much work, everyone's going to say no. Okay. Now, we're not in that market. We haven't been in that market in 15 years. I'm not expecting that market to be back anytime soon. Right now, you can sell just about any house in any condition. All the main thing you just need to know is you're not going to get the same price as someone who's done all the remodeling and someone who hasn't, right? So you also want to evaluate your risk tolerance. This is important for a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience doing any remodeling, okay? I don't want to understate this, okay? Whenever you do a remodeling project, if you're not careful, costs will get out of control, or worse, it will get finished and it won't look very good, okay? There are lots of ways that you can move a house forward with remodeling, but unfortunately, there are also some ways you can move a house back. And just hiring a good contractor isn't always, guys can know how to do remodeling, but a lot of them aren't fashion experts. And ultimately, cosmetic remodeling is a fashion kind of thing. So you want to be building, when you do a remodel, you want to be doing it for the buyers of today. Especially if you know you're going to sell, don't do it for yourself. Don't do what you've always wanted to do. Do something that the buyers of today are going to pay the most money for. So over the last 5, 6, 7 years, what buyers have paid the most money for are white kitchens and white and gray. Those have been the color schemes that people have wanted. That's changing a little bit. Okay. Any particular style that's out there doesn't have the same kind of run rate that it used to do. Styles used to last for 15, 20 years. Now they last for 8. And this one's pretty long in the tooth. So I think things are starting to change. But you need to understand that your risk tolerance, if you're very worried that it'll go sideways and you'll spend too much money, then it argues that maybe you shouldn't be doing the remodeling. And if you don't have any time available to do the remodeling, some people are in a big hurry. Well, you don't want to do a rush job. Okay, it's not likely to come out right, and you don't want to put a house on the market that's in the middle of a remodel. That's a big no-no. That's very, very dangerous to do. It can upset, the equity balance that you already have. And we're gonna go right over here. We're gonna ask house cat, Should you put a house on in the middle of a remodel? Yes, right? So there you go. There's the answer. The answer is no, you do not want to do that. Even House Cat knows that. Um, the best return anytime you do a remodeling project is when you're replacing the most outdated elements. If someone if someone redid your bathroom 15 years ago, maybe it was you, maybe it was the previous owner, right? But nobody's done your kitchen in 25 years or 30 years. I'm going to tell you that you should be remodeling the kitchen. And you might say, well, I don't really want to do the kitchen because it's a big project, but I can redo the bath. But the bath probably doesn't need it anywhere near as bad as the kitchen does. And so you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck because the new guy is going to realize you have a 30-year-old kitchen and he's going to want to pay much less for the house because he has to do the kitchen. But if you do the kitchen, then you've removed an enormous barrier, okay, for most buyers for the purchase of the house, and they will open their wallets when you put it on the market. So figuring out what you want to remodel is definitely just as important as figuring out if you want to remodel. And if you use these four things, your finances, the market, your risk tolerance, and understanding where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck in your house, then you're going to make a good decision for remodeling, right? So let's talk about some final considerations here before I wrap up this video. Obviously, I could go on and on and on and talk about this and show examples, and I may do that in later videos, but I'm not going to do it here. So be aware that cosmetic remodels often have much better return than infrastructure. I mean, truthfully, if you replace a roof or windows, they're usually negative equity, right? So a roof is usually even equity. If you spend $10,000 on a roof, your house is probably worth $10,000 more. Same thing with burners and AC equipment and all that stuff. None of that stuff really gets you 50% back. So most of the time, real estate agents will tell you not to do any of the infrastructure, but the cosmetics are very different. For the cosmetics, you definitely can get a 50% return, and in some cases, much, much more. Okay. So there is no substitute for having multiple contractors bid the work. You simply must get out there and find out what the going rate prices are. Even if you've used a contractor before and you know you can trust them, everyone may have figured out that they can know and trust them, and you could have a 9-month backlog of work, and he's happy to put you at the front of the queue so he can get to you next month, but he's going to charge you much more than he charged you the first time around because everyone's figured out he's great. So unfortunately, I can't stress it enough. You want to get a lot of bids. You want to look at these bids really closely to make sure that someone isn't saying, that they're going to do half of it and their price is half, and someone is really going to do a bang out job and their price is twice as much. One of those guys is cheaper, but one of those guys is probably a better value. And more importantly, he told you all the things that you need to do in order to really get a bang up job. So you need to go back to the first guy and say, I want you to do this, and then price that out. And then you can compare apples to apples. That's what I call an apples to apples comparison, where all the contractors are agreeing to do the similar amount of work. Okay. Don't assume that just because you do a remodel that you'll get it back. I have talked to so many homeowners, they call me in and they say, yeah, I just finished out the basement. And I say, oh, what'd you spend? They said 40. How much will I get back? And I say 40. So, and they said, well, I won't make any money. No, you won't make any money on a basement. You don't want to remodel a basement before you go to the market. I mean, that's it, very, very rarely is that going to be the right decision because the payback's not going to be there. People don't pay the same amount for below grade space unless it's truly magnificent below grade space with lots of windows and light. And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's just extra space. So, definitely ask experts who have done remodeling jobs, who have been in many, 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 many houses and seen what it looks like when it's done, what it looks like, when it's not done, and what the kind of market response is for that kind of stuff. I think most of us come around to sort of the same information. And if you hear the same story 2 or 3 times, then you're probably getting the right information, which will help you make decisions. So I know lots of people and they say remodeling is definitely something they want to do. And they hire the first contractor that they meet and they don't like the experience. And most of the time it's just because they didn't do all the research they needed to do. Don't be that person. Be a remodeling expert. If you have questions about this process for your house, make sure you reach out to me. My contact information is coming up. And I hope to see you all next time on Inside Real Estate.